Every nation on earth is in debt. The United States now owes more than $38 trillion, the highest figure in its history. The European Union carries about 14 trillion, Japan roughly 9 trillion. Even oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia, or export giants such as Germany and China, owe staggering sums. But here's the paradox. If everyone is in debt, then who is the lender? This is where money, power, and history collide, the beating heart of finance itself. And nothing is as simple as it seems. Debt is not merely a burden. It's the architecture of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every rise and collapse has been built upon this invisible scaffolding. Follow the chain of creditors long enough, and you reach a disturbing truth. The world owes no one, it owes itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. Today the global economy carries more than $315 trillion in debt, 3 times larger than the entire world's GDP. To understand how we arrived here, we have to go back to the beginning. Long before credit cards or digital transfers, the idea of national debt was born not on Wall Street, but on the battlefield. In 1694, England was at war with France and its gold reserves were running dry. The king turned to merchants for help. In exchange for perpetual interest payments backed by future taxes, they financed the crown. To manage this new arrangement, the Bank of England was created. It was revolutionary. The state could now spend money it didn't have, and lenders in return received a tradable promise from the government, a bond. This was the seed of the modern financial system. France copied it, Holland perfected it, and the newly independent United States adopted it to finance its revolution and westward expansion. National debt became not a sign of failure, but a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow meant the ability to rule. Empires once conquered lands to dig up gold. Now they issued bonds to collect interest. The battlefield had become the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries, debt is now the world's dominant export. America owes $38 trillion, Japan over $9 trillion, and global debt grows by $1 trillion every 100 days. Every nation borrows, every bank lends, every citizen is both debtor and creditor through taxes, savings, and pensions. So who holds the other end of the rope? Let's start with the US, because its debt is not just national, it's global. Roughly half of that $38 trillion belongs to the public investors. 2/3 of them are American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining third, about $9 trillion, is held by foreigners. Japan tops the list with around $1 trillion, followed by China with $800 billion, then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So yes, America owes China is technically true, but it's only about 2% of the total. Most of America's debt is owed to itself. The Treasury issues bonds, banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve repurchases them, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes to fund the interest, which flows back into American retirement accounts. It's a circular mirror. Debt is real, but the creditor is the reflection of the same system, and this circularity is global. Japan lends to the US. The US, through the IMF, lends to Europe. Europe, via the World Bank, lends to developing nations. And those nations deposit their reserves back into Western bonds. It's a worldwide game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Every country holds another's IOU. Each promise is secured by yet another promise. It sets like a poker table where every player borrows chips from the next, and the only rule keeping the game alive is that no one stands up. Yet there's a fourth and far more powerful layer, the markets. Behind every government bond stand hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks managing tens of trillions. They are the true arbiters of credit, deciding which country borrows cheaply and which must pay a premium to survive. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, and economies are rewritten overnight. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. And the ultimate market makers, the architects of the modern world, are central banks. They don't just manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time the Fed or the European Central Bank buys a government bond, new money is created. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. Every dollar in circulation represents a unit of debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, every bill, every digital dollar carries an invisible IOU etched on its surface. This loop has continued safely for decades. As long as investors believe governments will pay interest even if the principal is never returned, the machine keeps running. But what happens when confidence breaks? We've seen it before. In 2010, Greece couldn't pay its debts. Bondholders panicked, yields soared. The ECB and IMF intervened. But the rescue came with austerity, higher taxes, spending cuts, mass unemployment. For a generation, salvation became another word for sacrifice. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, foreign reserves vanished, fuel ran out, the government collapsed. When the system falters, creditors suddenly appear: IMF officials, rating agencies, faceless bondholders, tightening a nation's throat. And yet, after every collapse, the cycle restarts. New loans replace the old ones. Old debts are restructured. The machine is rebuilt under a new name, on the same balance sheet. Because in the 21st century, debt is not meant to be repaid, it's meant to be rolled over. Governments don't plan to pay off their debt. Not now, not ever. That's not conspiracy, it's policy. When you or I borrow, we're expected to repay the principal. Governments operate differently. They issue new bonds to cover the old ones, a perpetual subscription. Economists call it refinancing. Interest becomes the real product, the rent paid for stability. The global economy is addicted to that rent, like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. Today the financial system runs not on repayment, but on trust. The US will never close its $38 trillion debt, it will refinance it forever. Japan's debt exceeds 250% of its GDP, yet yields remain near zero. Investors don't expect repayment, they expect renewal. Why? Because for them, government debt is the safest collateral on earth. A US Treasury bond isn't a burden. It's the foundation of global finance. Pension funds hold it, banks use it as security, central banks treat it as cash. The system depends on governments never paying it off. If they did, the world would lose its most reliable asset. Imagine Washington deciding to settle all its debt tomorrow. Banks and funds worldwide would lose their safest holdings overnight. The dollar supply would shrink, deflation would strike, and collapse would follow. So instead, governments do the opposite, not recklessly, but rhythmically. Debt is the heartbeat of capitalism. It pulses through every mortgage, every pension, every market. That's why when politicians promise to balance the budget or eliminate national debt, they're selling an illusion. The goal is not to erase debt, but to keep it sustainable, tradable, and believable. Because when belief disappears, numbers lose meaning. Confidence collapses, interest rates spike, and the promise-based economy stops. Here lies the true secret of sovereign debt. The plan was never to repay it. The plan was to make the world believe in it. As long as trust endures, the numbers can grow forever. But trust isn't shared equally. Interest payments, DANT, flow evenly through society. They move from taxpayers and workers upward to institutions and investors. Debt is not only between nations, it's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality rises hand in hand with global borrowing. The system rewards those who owe and punishes those who pay. Sound familiar? It's the same story, scaled up from households to nations, from nations to the planet. Creditors aren't villains, and debtors aren't victims. They are two sides of the same engine. The question is, what happens when the engine runs out of fuel? New borrowing becomes the admission that old promises can't be kept, and then the question, who is the creditor, stops being abstract, it becomes personal. Because at the top of this global pyramid there's no single face to blame, not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF, but all of us. Modern finance has turned debt itself into money. Governments print it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has blurred beyond recognition. Once, debt meant slavery. Today it means balance. But if that balance breaks, if trust shatters, the illusion ends. And we remember what debt truly is. A promise that cannot be kept forever. If this gave you a new way of seeing the world, subscribe. History already has the answers, we just show you where to look.